Well, gents, this is like murderer's row for financing innovation right here. So I mean, the legacy history of direct and 1 degree of separation. I mean, this is a privilege for me to have the three of you gents here, so thanks very much. So we're here at the SDTS conference in Houston, and disruptive, innovation, emerging tech, what's coming downrange. So I want to chat about financing of innovation. Each of you sit in a really interesting perspective on the products and the platforms you're pushing out. So I'm really going to be interested in what you think innovation moving forward is. So first question on the table is, where we sit 2022, is venture capital and private equity the primary financing vehicles moving forward for emerging tech startups? So Brian, I'll start with you on that.
Sure. So historically, they have been, right? The strategics play in their world, their strategic world that makes sense to their business, and they typically invest in technology or companies that marry into their existing portfolio. Strategics do very little investment overall, and if we look historically from angel investors to de-risk a company enough, the next natural stage is the venture capital, it's PE firms. I don't see that changing for a while. And when VCs in private equity get contracted, you're going to see less innovation being developed. So we'll see over the next couple of years, but until there's a new model that can disrupt it and disrupt it effectively, I think it's going to be status quo for the foreseeable future.
Kurt, your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I don't disagree with the overall comment, but I see a shift because the venture cap community is shrinking, as we all know. They're getting really hard to work with. They have very specific needs they want now. You always knew where to go. You had the early stage guys, you had the mid stage, and now they're kind of all combined. And so I'm very fortunate because my last round I was oversubscribed. I turned down 2 term sheets, but that's very rare, right? So, but I would tell you, strategics are starting to step up. I know they wanted to actually participate in our round, but I turned them down. Privates, if you have the connections, the angels and the privates are, my company, half of the funding is completely private, and so I see a shift. I really do see a shift. I'm still fundraising. We never stop fundraising. So as we speak, I'm fundraising, but through VCs, large VCs. But I'm telling you, the bar is, in my opinion, has gone up high.
Darren, you've got an interesting perspective on this and some experience in this area. Thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it is shifting, and I think it is going to be traditional. I think there's room for all of this. There is a lot of money. I think there's no question there's money looking for investment, but those pockets can be from high net worth, family office, angel investors, but also coming from the public side. You're talking about hedge funds and private equity firms and more diverse things of interest in the space that we're in general. I think the experience of VCs have led a lot of them to be very narrow focused in terms of how much risk they're willing to take in terms of reimbursement, or how much risk they're willing to take in later stage capital. And so some of them, there are some early, and there are some that are really willing to go late, but there's a big chasm in the middle of where's that money going to come from and how there's innovation. And I think the strategics are stepping up to play bigger roles, but I think sticking to the traditional models, there is no tradition anymore. I think we're embarking a new space, and I think we have to acknowledge that here today with SDTS, I think there's a lot of things that are really interesting. The space is exceedingly growing, and with growth and excitement, I think the monetization investment in this particular space is probably different than the overall medtech or the overall investment space, because this happens to be the right center of where things are going.
Can I add to this, because I think this discussion is healthy and it's coming from a lot of perspective. I anchor myself with looking at the VC and PE deployment over the last 2 years. It's as big as it's ever been over the last 5 decades. So they are active. They're not contracting at this point. They are taking up. But with that being said, my latest round of financing is led by 2 strategics. So I have to agree, the dynamics, the model, it's evolving. But if I had to predict, the VCs, PE firms, if we just look at the numbers and the objective measures, they're sustaining still.
And I would tell you that VCs, no question, they want to be in robotics. big time. That's one of their key points. So when you speak to them, either they've been there and they want to continue to be there, or they missed the boat and they want to catch up. They want to catch up fast.
Kurt, is it robotics or is it a digital portfolio?
They haven't caught up on the digital, well, the ones I spoke to, they know about it, but robotics is in their face. Yeah. It's right there, staring at.
Well, is it because it's a clear and present threat to their analog solutions they have in the market today?
I would just say they've seen it as a huge trend. You know, it's here to stay, and it's going to become standard of care. We got to be part of it.
So question for the panel, just toss it out on the table, whoever wants to jump on it. We see other sort of industries who are really good at mass production, distribution, sales, but over the years, their ability to innovate, ideate, and bring technologies to the market, something's got to give. Because when you're that big, you sort of suffocate innovation. And we've seen biotech take their profits, their billions of dollars, create an entity to then maybe, Google did it, right? They had to do that with Alphabet. They off-balance sheet it so it doesn't suffer on their sort of stock price, and they can take a couple billion and say, listen, we don't ideate, innovate anymore, but let's off-balance sheet, let's create an entity and let the dogs run with investments, which is different than a strategic investment, because I've worked with J&J closely on their acquisitions and their integrations, and they're starting to realize now that they suffocate innovation when they get in the hallway too much. So let me just throw that on the table. How come that has not happened? It's happened in biotech, it's happened in pharma. How come it hasn't happened in device? Who wants to jump on that?
I mean, that's right in the scope of what the thesis that I work on. And it is absolutely true that, you know, Wall Street is stifling the big companies. They have to grow. They have to find room to grow. They're limited R&D budgets that they have to stay within. And when they have big businesses and have to do that, they make big bets, right? And some of the big bets are in robotics. The dollars they could put in robotics means those dollars are got to come out of other places where innovation has to occur. But they got a broad portfolio they now have to divvy up. Where do they get those dollars for investing? And the real problem with that also comes in is if you're going to go acquire, if those acquisitions are not accretive or not helping, it's also cutting into their R&D budgets. So finding off P&L ways to fund innovation for these big corporations is really important. In the past, a lot of that has been done by startups. That's what we do, right? But those startups now are forced to go longer and further in order to get to the point where they are accretive or make a difference. Otherwise, they affect their R&D budgets. So somehow or another, biotech has figured out that they can use these off P&L structures where large corporations can do partnerships and do partnership deals in order to fund their innovation. And so I think us as entrepreneurs have to look at the traditional model, but then you have to be really exceptional, or you have to plan to go very far to be accretive. Or you have to consider the benefits of partnering early on, like pharma does, where maybe you give up distribution rights, you give up some commercial rights, which are risky, in exchange for having a thoughtful pathway to exit. We all want to be that elephant. We all want to be that super unicorn. But innovation comes in different flavors, and there has to be different models out there, which include maybe having to do these kind of partnerships to do off P&L kind of R&D kind of exercises.
I mean, you know, we need like a couple hours to talk about that, right? Because I lived it, and I have scars to prove, and I have a lot of thinking to do still, because I'm still absorbing and understanding what happened when I was, you know, part of the big company, and what we could have done different, because I was J&J for a year after the acquisition of Verb, but overall I think you're absolutely correct. So there is this issue of leave it alone and let it flourish, right? I mean, you and your team worked amazingly hard to create that culture at Verb. Right, I joined. That was the first thing that hit me when I joined as a CEO. It was amazing. It was something that, you know, I built on and I believed in, and that's what drove that innovation, drove the ownership. That word ownership is really important. It doesn't exist in big companies. You know, especially the bigger they are, the more they're more worried about their retirement. They're more worried about their jobs. They're not worried about innovation. You know what I mean? You need people that believe and live and breathe that technology. And I call it's your company, because you're shareholders, you have control over it, you drive, and you own it. And that's all it needs. And to me, and I'm going to go on the edge here, they hire more consultants to mess with their heads on really what they need to do, versus believe in the believe in the experts that you've hired and that you've brought in and you brought in as through an acquisition, and let them earn their money. Let them earn their pay. And I think that's the biggest piece of it. As far as dividing, interesting enough is there is a lot of overlapping in the big companies. When it comes to digital and robotics, I'll give you J&J. J&J is the only company, and I mean it, is the only company that in my opinion, can absolutely dominate this space. Absolutely dominated in every area, from digital to robotic. They can really ortho, soft tissue, whatever. They just got to come together and they got to make it happen, because Intuitive is doing it, right? They're sitting there, tripling down. You know it, and I know it. They're sitting there tripling down because they see this dynamic of J&J coming together and this big potential competitor with the name. So I would really highly recommend that they start to think that way. Medtronic's the same way. They got to get going. They got to figure out what horse they're going to bet on, and they got to put all their efforts behind it.
So this conversation is around paying for innovation, and so there's a couple components here. There's the pile of money, but the pile of money sometimes can be a problem, right? I've seen money be more of a problem when you have excess of it than when you don't have enough, because constraint drives innovation. While we're on that conversation, each of you are elite players as engineers, salespeople, commercial people. I know all three of you really well early in your careers. If I called you up, so we got a pile of money, but without the brains and the creativity left unconstrained to run, the money doesn't matter. So if I would have called you up in your career, and I called you each up in your career, and I'm like, listen, I got this great tech within Medtronic, J&J, I don't want to pick on anybody, Edwards, you'd be like, yeah, no. But if I said, listen, this is an off-balance sheet investment company that operates freely. It's not in Cincinnati, it's not in New Jersey, it's not in Minneapolis, it's actually in Palm Beach, Florida. And you guys can run, it's a skunk works. You might lean in on that. Oh, yeah. If you were giving a piece of the action on outcomes.
Do you know what is the motivator on this, Joe? If we think about what has built your brand, it's about building teams. It's talent, it's asset. And the image that you just described allows each of us to build a team around that money, to be successful, to take the risk. And it was interesting when Darren was just talking about his model in taking risk from the large companies and then sharing it back. Companies grow by taking risk. Small companies, by taking risk, have exponential growth. What you just proposed or had me imagine was the ability to build an organization, key people. The greatest asset of any company is not the technology. Never has been, never will be. We got to grow businesses by having the right people around that cache of money. And I think that's the first step, and that's what motivates all of us, to build teams, to get the people around us, to make it all successful in the end. And now this is something you built a brand on, so I know you appreciate that.
Well, you just said it happened with me. So when I joined Verb, that was my only condition. I looked at J&J in the face and looked at Google in the face. The only way I'm going to join is you're going to treat this like a joint venture. I'm not a division of Johnson & Johnson. I'm not a division of Google. I'm the CEO of Verb. And we're going to have a board. We're going to conduct the business as a board. That was the only condition. And by the way, they were completely let me do that. You know it. 18 months later, we had a product ready to go, right? It took 18 months, but they did. They were, and yes, there were days that I had to push back. Yes, there were days that I had to show my edge. But that's with any startup. Like you're gonna have board dynamics that sometimes you have to position yourself that way. But I have to give them credit. I mean, they left me alone, and that was my only condition. And I told them, I said, just letting you know, if it's going to be in the division of somebody, I'm not interested. But if you let me be a true joint venture between two, oh, come on, Google and Johnson & Johnson. I mean, it's a dream job. It was an absolute. So it was tough. I'm not saying it's easy, but they did leave me alone and let me do my thing.
Yeah, I think that the key word in the last two conversations about risk reward, right? And what makes a startup unique and often unique is you either do it or you're going to die. It's the survival, and people that choose to go do that are not afraid of that risk-benefit profile. And you talked about people in larger corporations, innovation, larger corporations. There, it's a lot. Sometimes the risk adversity. It's like if I do something and fail, I'm in trouble. If I do nothing, I can succeed. right? And so I don't think it's about big and small. It's about environments or the right people where you have to accomplish it and your goals are tied to the risk profile. And so there's been examples in times where, you know, J&J with the drug-eluting stent with Cordis, right, where they were behind and had to make it happen, and they bet on it, and they made bet on it big, and they succeeded, right? But it was about risk and the ability for the management and the corporation to say, I'm willing to take a risk. These corporations are getting so big that that risk tolerance becomes difficult. And so some of these off-P&L structures are helping with risk.
We used to always joke when I was at Boston Scientific, the most successful person on the organizational chart has never made a wrong decision.
Yeah, that's really scary. So to that point, let me run down this, because this is about how do we finance innovation. And too many times when I use the word finance, it goes towards financial capital, not human capital. And that's what's bubbling to the top here is, so again, money is an issue sometimes when it's in excess. So there's this law out there called Price's Law. And Price's Law is really simple. Is if you take, in a standard organization, if you take the number of people in the organization and take the square root of that number, they do 50% of the work. Okay? So if I'm a 100-person organization, 10 people are doing 50% of the work, 90 people are doing the other 50%. That's in a standard organization. In elite organizations, Price's Law has an over-indexing towards all of those people, for the most part, are moving that ball equally forward. And so when we think about the organizations each of you respectively have built outside of the large corporate, that where Price's Law is being true, we've got to create an environment in medtech where we can have all Price's Law people in that emerging tech startup, but I can't attract the Price's Law people if the overlord is there. And so I wonder when there's going to be a structure where J&J and Medtronic goes, off balance sheet is NewCo, here's $4 billion, it won't affect our stock price, but you and I know it takes 10 years to build a robot.
They were trying. J&J was trying. They're trying to build that in the Bay Area. You know that. I mean, that was something that and I think it's smart. I think it is the only way, because no matter what you do, that balance sheet issue becomes real, right? Even as a JV, I was dealing with that, right? And then when you become part of J&J, then you're definitely dealing with it, right? Because you're now fighting for stapling or fighting against energy, which is core product.
It's a zero-sum game.
Yeah, it's just
it's a zero-sum game when you're dealing with the strategic. But if you off-balance sheet that, and I'm just going to use that as a label.
But why are we so focused on asking the question about strategics? Why is it all about strategics?
Take us somewhere else, yeah.
Right, but and the reason I say that is innovation doesn't have to come from the strategics.
Where can it come?
The distribution channel and access to the market and access to manufacturing comes from strategics, but innovation doesn't have to come from there. And so I think innovation comes from lots of places. It comes from need, it comes from the right people and the right organizations. But I think strategics have to recognize largely as they get bigger, their distribution channels. Large pharma are distribution channels.
Yeah,
and they got to do what you do well and let other people do what they do well. So I know you're asking lots of questions about how does a strategic take their money. I think they have to be creative with it. But the world of startups and the world of entrepreneurs and the world of people that are, starving for innovation, it's not going to go away. It's how do we fund that innovation and bridge the gap to the strategics is a good question.
So my experience with strategics, and I've spent most of my professional career with large cap companies, and they're well aware of the problem you just described. And I'll give you an example. Covidien bought my last company, and at acquisition, and prior to acquisition, they were so focused on the integration of the people. The first thing they said is, we don't want to destroy your culture. The first thing they did is destroy the culture, right? But they're aware of it, and they're getting better at it. And now the motto in large companies, it actually is now hurting the earlier acquisitions, because J&J and Medtronic will look and say, hey, if we acquire you too early, we'll ruin you. We know we will destroy you. And these are conversations that happen with the leadership in these organizations. So they have to let you bake a little further. You got to get a little further along, so when we do integrate, we won't destroy you. Your culture will be stronger, the organization will be stronger, your quality systems will look more like our quality systems.
Yeah, to his point, it fits in the bag. It goes right into the salesman, man. They can sell it. They don't have to develop it.
Yeah, but you know what you
anymore.
lose? The second the acquisition takes place and everybody cashes their check, they go to find their next emerging tech startup.
So here's the evolution of that. When the people of an organization that were just acquired are important, there's always an incentive that's typically put in place for those employees that are high value to make that acquisition successful. It's an insurance policy. So options, incentives, to keep the earnouts, all that stuff is part of the reality to mitigate the risks of buying too early, destroying cultures, mass exodus. So there's checks and balances in
I
all this.
understand that structure, but I will tell you, I've spent 32 years of getting the phone calls of we were just acquired, I made enough money, there's a tail on this, get me the F out of here, and I want to go do this somewhere else. So,
But
all right.
can I go back to paying for innovation, right?
Yeah.
You said let it bake longer, let it
Yeah.
go longer.
Yeah.
But that means early investors, the people you're around, the seed, your family who are coming in early, now have to stay a lot longer. Those early investors who you care about in the beginning either have to know they're going to have to be in for a long road, or they get replaced and they get wiped out. That paying for innovation is not getting solved right now. And so what these large VCs are doing, rightly so, is getting syndicates that know that you're coming in early, you're coming mid, and coming in late. When you say paying for innovation, in the world where we have to go further and longer, that's where the issues come in. How do you fund those companies longer and bigger? And again, the space that we're in, what you're dealing with is so exciting right now. You're not considering where's the money going to come from. You know it's going to be there, but innovation comes in other flavors, and paying for that is still going to be tricky because it's going to take longer for these things to percolate longer.
So, another subject, because we will go on for 2 hours on this. This is, and I will, but you guys all have to do panels in a couple minutes. So, there's new money coming into health tech, and I call it health tech on purpose, and medtech is a subset of health tech. And the money coming in is investing in non-PMA, 510K, non-intraoperative procedures or diagnostics. So we have people here like Proximie, we have people like ExploreMed, Avail, others, that they're impacting the 18% GDP that is eating our country away today, and we're realizing that we really can't move the needle in the OR, in the cath lab, in order to affect that. But they're digital products now that right now are on the fringes, but may move into the middle of that distribution curve eventually. But it's, I'll call it uneducated money. Some people call it dumb money, but there's uneducated money coming into health tech right now on the digital fringes. Massive and great, because the VCs have a playbook and they know what their investment theorem is, and they won't go outside that. So they're going to miss the bus on these digital investments. Do you think that's all that money is smart, and once they start to get the lay of the land on the digital stuff, will that start to push more towards mainstream investments? And is the future of medtech digital? What does the future of medtech, health tech look like? Will it look anything like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we were in the primes of our career, right?
So the ecosystem that we're in is completely changing. So to answer your question succinctly, the fringe new players, dumb money, smart money that's coming in, people typically stay in their lane, right? They work in their competency. They will have to execute whatever their initial plan was prior to making new plans to get further inside the space of medtech. I'm curious to see myself what the next 10 years look like, because I don't think any of us know the answer, but we're all excited to see it. We know it's changing. It's moving at a much faster pace than we've ever seen, being led by the innovation of AI, digital learning, right? Everything that we see, say, think about over the next 2-3 years is going to be different. How we receive information, how we give information. It's already changed over the last 2. It's going to change again over the next 3 to 4. So it'll be a fascinating time in medtech to see the evolution of the space, the ecosystem, as all these new players come in. They may be in the fringe, they may continue to come into the core business, but it'll be exciting. And unfortunately, I don't know the answer, but I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I would tell you, man, I've been, for the last 3 years, maybe 4, I saw this digital, shift, right, and this push. And here's my opinion, and this is because of the Verb, right? As you know, we were all, half of what we were doing was digital, right? It was powerful digital. What it taught me was, this is a long road, right? big effort. But my opinion is there will be short-term wins, that people are focusing on, from efficiency standpoint, things like that are low-hanging fruit. To get to that really things that we're all hoping for, you're looking at a lot of time, a lot of data, a lot of investment. FDA is going to be all over it. No question they're going to be scrutinizing, but it's here. It is the future. There's no way anybody is going to be successful without having that piece of the equation implemented or included in the story. I just think it's a longer term.
Kurt, you bring up a really good point about regulatory, because the FDA doesn't know how to handle the new environment, the new ecosystem. They're learning on the job right now, and I think that is going to create a bit of complexity and maybe slow down the world a little bit. But it is coming.
Yeah, is it smart or dumb? It's really smart to go after things that don't require regulatory approval. That's really smart, right? And so I think there's going to be those, and it's going to be a number of those. And one of the things that the foundation of this digital age is about data. Like we all talk about, it's all about data. Who's better than, and what does the FDA and regulators want? Data. And so who's going to be better? They're going to generate a lot of data in whatever they're doing, and they're going to have to go to the FDA with a lot of data, and it's going to have to change how this goes. I don't think any of us know how FDA, you can see the shift in handling robotics and how dramatic it's been to the new innovation and how that's going to be. We don't really know how well that digital is, but Apple's entry into digital, it is there, and they get it approved because the overwhelming amount of data they can provide. So I think, is it going to be better or faster or change us? It definitely is going to change us, and how that's going to look is going to be interesting.
Yeah. So fueling innovation, we talked about finance, we talked about human capital, which is the number one, and then the emerging entrants into this space who have deep pockets from Sand Hill or anywhere else these days that never touched health tech, med tech before are now touching it. What didn't we talk about that we should have talked about before I take us out?
It's hard. What we do is hard. Like, a lot of us have done some of these things for many, many, many years. And people that are doing this, I think it's said very often inside there, if you're doing this to make money, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? I think as VCs come in here, as money comes in here, obviously they're financial investors, they want to make money. If you don't realize how long and how hard this is, they're going to come in and come out. The people that win here understand how hard this really is to do, and how and creating the business, the culture, the finance, the environment. It's hard, but we do it because this is what we do. New people that come in are going to have to learn that lesson the hard way.
I will tell you that is, so my 32 years and more than 8,000 successful marriages I've made, very few people leave the industry and stay out of it. I will tell you the number of calls I get who said, yeah, I left, I had to come back. And it's very true. I think viscerally, this is innate in the people who are in this industry, and they can't find that fulfillment outside of it. So.
Joe, I'll add one thing, and we see it here at this conference. It's a very small, incestuous world, and I think we all genuinely like one another, and we like being around one another and participating and growing together. I have people that I've started with 20 plus years ago that are here now running different companies, divisions of large caps, and we're all equally as proud of one another. So the camaraderie, the friendships that we've built in the space of medtech are absolutely phenomenal. It's always what keeps me anchored here, keeps me wanting to come to these meetings. So I think that's important, is the personal side of all this.
Agree 100%, 100%. So gentlemen, thanks so much. I know all of you are sitting on panels this afternoon or have to jet off somewhere to change the world and save some patients. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
It's always a pleasure.
Thanks. I'm Joe Mullings from Houston, the SDTS conference. Be well.